Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 144 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Azurae Johnson Redmond for this episode. And Azurae is the founder of Young, Black, and Widowed, and she is also the foreword writer for my new book just out this week, Widowed Parents Unite, 52 Tips to Get Through the First Year from One Widowed Parent to Another. And I am thrilled that Azurae and so many other contributing authors are part of this book. I know that Widowed Parents Unite would not be nearly what it is without each and every one of these moms and dads who decided to share their stories with all of us and with those newer on this widowed parenting path. And before we jump into my discussion with Azurae, I wanted to let you know that Widowed Parents Unite is now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and bookshop.org, and you can also ask your favorite independent bookstore to order it for you. And if you head on over to our website at widowedparentinstitute.com, you'll find a new piece on the site that is adapted from the book, an essay, plus the book trailer where you can hear all about the book and meet all of the contributing authors in just 3 minutes. All right, so that's all the news from here. Let's get on with the show. Support for this podcast comes from BetterHelp. You can talk with a licensed professional therapist online, anytime, anywhere. Visit betterhelp.com/widowedparent to learn more and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/widowedparent. I hope you'll check it out. My guest today is Azurae Johnson Redmond. Azurae is a certified grief coach and is the founding director of the nonprofit Young, Black, and Widowed, Inc. She's joining us today from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Azurae, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, well, I've really been looking forward to this for lots of reasons, including the fact that we're celebrating now this week, as people hear this, the availability of the brand new book, Widowed Parents Unite, 52 Tips to Get Through the First Year from One Widowed Parent to Another. And I mention this because, drum roll, you had an important role in this book. Tell us about that.
Yes, I had the honor of writing the foreword for this amazing book that you guys are going to absolutely find so encouraging.
And I am thrilled that you did the foreword for this for all kinds of reasons, including the fact that I think you bring another perspective to the experience of widowed parenting, right? My kids were 9 and 11 when my husband died, and that's one type of experience. And another type of experience might be someone whose kids are 16, 17, 18, and of course, and I'm generalizing here, right? There are lots of differences, not based on ages of kids, based on circumstances, based on all kinds of things. And your kids were on the very other end of the age spectrum. How old were your kids?
So my oldest son, Holt, was 10 months old, and my second son, and I only have two, was actually only 5 months in utero. So he was still in my womb. I was 5 months pregnant when my late husband passed away.
So about as young as you can get, an infant and a baby who is soon to be born.
Yes.
At the time you became a widowed mom. So, okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And let's just back up before we, spoiler alert, I guess. Let's back up and tell us a little bit about life when life was normal, before your husband died. Tell us about kind of normal life, your before time.
Oh, well, my late husband and I were together for 9 total years. We met when I was 18 years old and he was 23. We were studying engineering. He was an electrical engineer and I was a chemical engineer at Tennessee Tech University. And academics were a major part of our actual relationship, with studying together, though in different directions. We also led the engineering joint council over at Tennessee Tech too. And in our time together, we'd had so many opportunities, from traveling to over 30 countries, to most of my internships that took me to work at NIST in Washington, D.C., which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, to working at Eastman Chemical Company. And then likewise, as when he got his job, again, he was 5 years older than me, here in Chattanooga, Tennessee at Mesa Associates. He was actually sent abroad to work in Colombia in South America. So we had amazing, wonderful travel stories. So many people said long before my husband ever became ill and sick that we had almost experienced a lifetime and a retirement together because we went so many places and did so many things. We worked, and then on the weekends, my late husband enjoyed hang gliding at Lookout Mountain Flight Park, which is here locally. It's the #1 hang gliding flight park in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So he was
Hang gliding.
Yes. I mean, he was a hang glider pilot. It was absolutely fabulous. I was a scuba diver. I went, dove in the Great Barrier Reef, et cetera, et cetera. So
Wow.
we loved extreme sports that were handled safely with training. We loved travel, and we loved working extremely hard as engineers. But the pinnacle of everything was finally deciding to settle down and buy our house after we got married. We got married in the U.S. Virgin Islands. It was beautiful. Was settling down in Chattanooga, which was exactly where we wanted to be because that's where the hang gliding flight park was, and choosing to have our first son. And it was such an exciting, wonderful time. Our whole family, it was the first grandbaby on both sides. I mean, it was literally an explosive confetti announcement surprise. Literally, we put off cannonballs in my in-laws' backyard. It was lovely, and it was a lovely start. And actually, when on his first Father's Day, we were the first Mother's Day, first Father's Day, first Mother's Day, we actually were able to announce that we were expecting our second son on Father's Day.
Wow.
And on Mother's Day, actually, we were dedicating our child Holt to the church, and we asked God for a sibling, and apparently he said yes right in that instance, because Father's Day, the very first Father's Day, we announced that our second child was on the way, and we actually named him before my late husband passed, Matthew. My late husband's name was Matthew Holt Redmond, and his name is Matthew, and that's where the two names Matthew and Holt come from.
So your first son Holt has your husband's middle name, and your second son Matthew has your husband's first name.
And what's so funny is our second son came out looking exactly like my late husband, even though they actually never got to meet Earthside.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that with us. So now I'm imagining hang gliding and scuba diving and all these exciting things. You mentioned a lot of international travel, and I think you mentioned that your husband had an international job, and I think that ended up then being connected somehow to what would ultimately happen.
Yes, he did work at Puerto Drummond, which is a very large coal port, and so some of the largest ships in the world will come into that port and ship coal out. And there was not, the PPE provided was a bandana to go around your face rather than a mask.
Wow. And this was in Colombia, I think you said?
Yes.
Okay. So he was down there doing engineering work.
Yes. And that's multiple months out of the year for many years.
Okay. Yeah. And so then at some point, I believe he was diagnosed with lung cancer.
Yeah. So we were pregnant with our first son, Holt, and everything was really going really well until one day he just was really sick, kind of just out of the blue and coughing. And they found lung cancer. And it was absolutely crushing, but we had all been assured that it was such an early stage that they were going to be able to do a very very nearly non-invasive surgery through his throat, actually, which is kind of a new way of doing it, because it was on the docket to actually literally cut him all the way apart, but they actually went down through his throat and they tried and were able to actually get the mass. And we were told literally that everything was fine, that this was wonderful. So when our baby Holt was born, we were just over the moon because we were just like, wow, you are, and then a year from that passed, and he was lung cancer free. So I had this baby. My husband, proverbially had his health, and as far as he felt and I felt and everyone, we were so hopeful that everything was going to be okay. And he had some of the top doctors at the Sarah Cannon Cancer Institute in Nashville. So he really, we were confident that he was going to be fine. We decided that we did want to have our second baby closer together than necessarily waiting years out, just because if anything did pop up, then we were looking at things that could be damaging to potentially his fertility. And so we decided, okay, well, let's go for it. And well, it just,
happened.
They're very close together. They're like a year apart in age. So we were we were so happy. We were so happy about it. And again, he had been assured, you're doing great. Your O2 stats, everything was great. He was taking walks after work as the doctor had told him to do. And he was feeling pretty good for the most part. And then he crossed over at a year and a half, lung cancer free. He had his testing done. They were like, you know what? This is really amazing. We're so happy. At the new surgery that we did through the throat was so positive. Like, it couldn't be better. Like, I'm so happy for you. And it wasn't a month later that after he had given a presentation outside of the city, he came back home and he went on the walk they told him to take. And, within a few, he passed away almost in someone's driveway, was taken to Erlanger, and then passed away there about 5 hours later. And of course, through, later on, it took months and months to find out, what happened. But it turned out that they had missed a key point in his healthcare that was just stunning. So it was a mistake.
Wow, that is terrible. And I mean, here you are thinking, he's had this terrible cancer. He's beat it. We've got a young child and another one on the way. Things are looking good. But then his death ends up becoming a surprise.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people will say, how in the world, if he had in the past lung cancer, was it a surprise? Well, some people might remember in the past that there was this total eclipse that happened. And in Tennessee, it was a huge event. So most colleges stopped all classes, businesses, et cetera, et cetera. And we went to my wonderful in-laws' home, his mom and dad's, and they have a beautiful, beautiful land. And my mom was there too, his whole family. And we got to see this beautiful eclipse happen. And it was actually during the day you would see it. And actually it was like 3 days later after that. And I'm so happy that we were there. We always planned to be there and I had Holt there. I was pregnant, his brother was there, sister-in-law, their cousins, et cetera. It was just this wonderful gathering. And I absolutely assure you, when we told them, Matthew just died, everyone was like, we just saw him. We just saw him 3 days ago at your house. He was fine. He wasn't wheezing. He didn't look like anything was wrong with him. He was looking through this telescope, and there's this beautiful picture of him lifting Holt up. That we had Holt's eyes obviously covered, because you do not want your child to look into an eclipse.
Right.
But he just held Holt up. And it's just such an inspiring picture because it was so sweet. But so I'm really glad that we had those moments together. And of course, even at work, people were just like, I saw him, I made the call that night to tell them so that the people who were on his projects, I mean, his phone always was blowing up with people asking about this and thus and so on different projects. And I can't tell them. So I immediately, I called his boss, I called his superiors and I said, hey, this happened. I wanted to give you a few hours before work starts tomorrow to go through
Figure
the
out what to
process of
tell. Yeah.
figure out what to do. And they were just like, what just happened? And I was
Right.
like, well,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was a very difficult situation. And that is how, but it did turn out to be that lung cancer complications. But for people that cared so much about health and having the best doctors, it was a complete blindside and slap in the face. And
Wow.
sincerely, he did not hide. I was there when they talked about his health and everything. He
Sure.
had doctors here in Chattanooga as well that he saw, but not that we're doing the extensive chest, that they were just reviewing to be nearby just in case.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing all that with us. So now then your husband has died, you're pregnant, you have an infant. I think also that at that point you were no stranger to grief.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what had happened when I think you were 19?
Yes. So actually, when I was a freshman in college, only a few months after meeting my late husband, and we were dating, my dad passed away. So I meet my late husband, or to be late husband, at school and in college, and it was an instantaneous connection. We were instantaneously that was just it. Even my father had said he's the one after meeting him and getting to know him. And he was a very discerning man. So for him to say that very much surprised everyone. He was just so certain. And, I went to college in my hometown where Tennessee Tech is in Cookeville, Tennessee. And so Matthew, my husband, could come over to my house and have dinner with my family every weekend if we did, but mostly we were working on like our projects and stuff like that.
Sure.
But outside of that, he was a part of the family. My mom called him son. It was just, it was hard. So then after meeting who was the love of my life, my father passes away shortly after that first blissful dreamlike Christmas. So that was a crushing blow. But what really was amazing is that a lot of men would have walked away and said, hey, your life is a little challenging right now and you live in your hometown. I think, I'm just going to jet, but he did not. He was so supportive and helpful from literally, we always held hands. He would walk me to all my classes after that, because unfortunately, mental health support was not as it wasn't as for college students who were in very difficult disciplines like chemical engineering. There were no breaks unless you wanted to give up everything. So I am so happy that these days there are those mental health support services that are there and in place. But if I didn't want to lose a national research fellowship that I had earned for summer at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is called NIST in Maryland near Washington, D.C., that was absolutely that summer. So only a few months after my husband passed away. I would have to
father passed away.
I'm sorry. After my father passed away, I would have to continue all of my classes and do well.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say that I did, but I don't recommend getting up in the morning and going and taking a test right after finding out that the person who was in my life my whole life, and again, my parents were married. My mom was widowed in her early 50s, had passed away. That was very difficult and very much, much harder in a very small town to deal with. But there were no breaks. There was no leniency. There were no accommodations. I could either continue or quite literally lose everything. And I had a full ride because of academics. So I powered through, and I do not recommend that, but I did. I powered through. I took the internship. I left home and lived in DC at 19 for quite a while. And all the time, my wonderful at that point, boyfriend, right,
Mm-hmm.
was the most supportive thing in the world. And then, we only had a little bit of time, together, it feels like, because but for me, it's forever because it was the entirety of my adult life. I mean, when
Mm-hmm.
you meet someone at 18 and they're the only person that you've known, and
Mm-hmm. And
there is no before time.
right. And you have 9 years together. I mean, that's your whole young
Yeah,
adulthood. Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I have heard, I mean, I think it is tricky grief in college for college students and, the supports that are or are not available and the different options. And, at 19 years old, technically you're an adult, but you're not a very old adult. And also, most people don't lose their parents for another bunch of decades after that. So it is a very unexpected, I think, situation to face. And then, as you said, your mother then became a widow and a widowed
Yes.
mom. A widowed mom. I mean, you were a young adult, but still.
And she actually worked on campus in
Oh,
multicultural affairs, which is now intercultural affairs, and just
ah,
recently retired from there. So, as you can
lovely.
see, everything was extremely close knit, which is
Yeah.
wonderful because the support was there. I had lived there in that city pretty much almost since I was born in the same
Hmm.
home,
Mm,
small town feels.
yeah.
But the community was very supportive, and I'm so happy for that. I'm
Yeah.
so
That's
happy for the
terrific.
support and the love of our churches.
So speaking of support, then, if we jump in the timeline again to the time when your husband died 9 years later, approximately. Um, I gather you had difficulty finding support that of kind of existing support groups that might have people who you could identify with.
Right. So I did obviously the first place that I started for support was with the amazing psychologist, Dr. David Solovey, that's in town in Chattanooga. He has actually retired, and he was my rock for my grief journey. And I so appreciate his help for many, many years and everything that he has done. But he recommended that I go and find maybe an online group of young widowed people like myself. And I was just like, I don't know that I'll be able to find that. It just felt, things in grief feel so insurmountable. But I tried, and the first thing I came across was the Widowed Parent podcast, which is
Ah,
your amazing podcast.
that's
And
amazing.
when I didn't really fit in with the local widow groups, albeit they're wonderful, just because it's a little bit, even their young widow group was for people who were closer to much 60s and closer to 60, and I was 27 years old.
With
So,
an
in
infant and
being
another one on the way.
right and pregnant with a 10-month-old. So,
Right.
I was like, I have to find someone to talk to. So I would listen to your podcasts while my babies were sleeping because they would fall asleep. Again, too young to understand anything that was being said, but just
Mm,
falling asleep to the words because you could listen to a podcast all night long. So the
right.
person that kept me, I don't want to say sane, but calm during those sleepless nights of feeding two babies, um, was your voice, which was really helpful.
Wow. Wow. As a podcaster, as someone who's been doing this for a while, I mean, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's interesting because you never know who you're touching, right? With
Yeah.
the different interviews and discussions, and I just thank you, I guess, for for sharing
Oh,
that
you're
because
welcome.
yeah, and it's that's the reason I think most people who are doing this work, including you're now doing this work, which we'll get to in a minute, want to be making a difference and an impact. So, and here, I mean, this is so strange to think. I guess it was a few years ago. Um, I had no idea that you were in Chattanooga, Tennessee, listening to my shows as you're,
Yeah.
trying to fall asleep or not falling asleep or whatever, and your kids are sleeping
Yeah.
next to you. And so, okay, well, so that's awesome. So you then So you mentioned the local groups. I totally get it. I hear this all the time, right? The young widows are 50 or 60, and you're like, yeah, but I'm 27.
I
So
was literally some of them would say I'm their, son or daughter's age,
yeah, or
or
less.
some, or less for some. So
Yeah.
as much as the support, was there, it wasn't quite the right fit
Mm.
because I was going through a different sort of difficulty.
Yeah, it's a different life stage. It's a different set of challenges, and it's not necessarily. I mean, there's no point competing like who's got things worse or whatever.
Oh
It's
no!
like,
Oh no!
yeah,
No!
which
Because I can't imagine being with someone even longer and losing that person. So that there's definitely no comparison of
yeah,
grief out there.
and
But
I'm not saying you're trying to compare. Obviously, I'm just saying like it's all just like which parts are going to be harder, right? Like,
yeah.
so yeah, so you ended up then deciding to step into this gap yourself and
Mhm.
start something. Tell us about that.
So in 2020, during the pandemic, Zoom became a lot more popular, et cetera, et cetera. And so I started the nonprofit Young, Black, and Widowed.
Mm-hmm.
And I founded it and I was so excited about it. It was absolutely the most wonderful thing because suddenly there were young Black widows and widowers, just like myself, coming into the support group to receive support. And I found a group of people just, I guess you could say, just like me. And we also serve people of all nationalities, religions, and we heavily support the LGBTQ community as well. But it was just so wonderful to make a safe space for everybody. And I always said that to them that I'm healing right alongside with you. And I just want to bring everybody together and we can figure this out together.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it was great. It was a wonderful community and it's become just an amazing community.
I think that's terrific. And I just want to read, I grabbed from your website here this description, which I love. Young Black and Widowed Inc. is a progressive 501c3 nonprofit plus podcast, which connects millennial and Gen Z widows and widowers of color to a daily one-on-one peer support line, grief resources, scholarships, and professionals within their cities across the United States.
Yeah, we have a daily support line that anyone can call. It's 423-401-9274. And they can call and without giving identifying information, ask questions like, what forms should I bring to the Social Security office? How do I get, health insurance? Where do I start with life insurance? Who do I even contact? These little questions that a lot of other people who might be older already have friends that they can contact about that. If that's not quite so obvious, like we answer those questions and then we try to connect you and your community. We'll do like the casework to try and find a professional in your community that can help you. So if you're looking for a Black mental health therapist, we'll try to do a search and see if we can help you find that, or a lawyer or someone who can help continue the care that you need. And so that's really wonderful. Outside of our weekly support groups that we've been having for the last 3 years, every single week on Tuesday nights at 8
Wow.
Eastern.
Oh, good, good. Well, and so I'll put the links in the show notes for sure to where people can find your website and find those groups. Can you give us again? I want to write down the phone number because I want to put the phone number in the show notes too. Can you tell us again what the number is?
423 401 9274.
Okay,
and then we
perfect.
also now offer, as of this year, because I became a certified grief coach, we now offer one-on-one grief coaching as well. It's all grief coaching, but we also offer one-on-one grief coaching as well. And then we do pet therapy too with our certified Love on a Leash therapy dog, Winter, for those that live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he comes out and visits with everyone. And our Children of the Widow play dates, we do that, and we have to get the kids together so that they can have fun in a supportive environment. We don't necessarily lead a support group, but we just allow the kids to interact and have fun with each other.
Nice. And this is okay. So for people who are in or around Chattanooga, it sounds like there's some in-person options.
Yes. And if you're not in Chattanooga, we actually have met up in Louisiana. They went to an NFL football game. I believe it was the Louisiana Saints versus something. And they've met up in New York City as well as in Florida. And we're thinking about West Coast as well. So these are small meetups, but we do that. There are opportunities to meet up in person, though
That's
few and far
terrific.
between. And then I
Yeah.
lead workshops at, like last year, I have my Feel Your Transformative Passion workshop, seminar, speaking that I do at Common House, which is a social club in Chattanooga. And I did that last year and just helped people find their passion, no matter what they were grieving or what their circumstances were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then
Wow.
lastly, we have the Matthew Holt Redmond Memorial Scholarship that we give to people who are trying to attain higher education after being widowed. So our first recipient during the pandemic was a nurse who was getting her bachelor's, and we're so happy for her.
Oh, that's terrific. And is that something that there's more information on your website about? Is it an ongoing thing?
Yes. And our website is www.youngblackwidowed.org. So
Okay, great. We'll put that
just
in
a
the show notes.
plethora of
Yeah.
fun things, as well as a social media presence where people can connect with us. And a lot of times that's not necessarily through Zoom. We do a lot on Clubhouse and other different platforms where people can message and ask questions or do a live or get together, be in a Facebook room. So we meet people where they're at in terms of social media.
Yeah, terrific. Well, it sounds like you've built a great resource there for people. And again, looking at my notes here, if anybody is millennial, Gen Z, widows and widowers, so all genders and people of color, is specifically who you're focusing on serving.
Oh, we actually serve all nationalities.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, all nationalities. We serve all nationalities. It doesn't matter. Also, if you have a person who wasn't married when they passed away, we serve them too. And we actually also serve people who are soon to be widowed. They're part of our group as well. So we really accept everyone, and we love being a resource. And that's what our nonprofit is. It's really just a resource to help people find amazing podcasts like yours and amazing books like Future Widow and the upcoming one that we have now. So that's really what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, I love that you have built something that you would have been looking for yourself. Something,
Yes.
right, that didn't exist.
Right.
That you found this gap and said, hey, I can jump in here.
Mm-hmm.
I can help fill this and build this out. I think that's terrific.
And the idea for the name actually came to me because actually, if you look at a lot of podcasts or groups, it will say young, Black and married, young, Black and bougie, young, Black and and there wasn't a young, Black and widowed. So I filled in the niche for that too.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Okay, cool. Well, thank you. And so we'll make sure we'll put all that in the show notes for people that can find out more and connect with you guys. So I'm thinking about here, you mentioned the service dog, and I'm curious about, and I think his name is Winter.
Yes.
Yeah. So is this something then that you got involved in related to this grief experience somehow?
Yes, I actually went to the shelter just to find a regular, just run-of-the-mill dog.
Like a pet dog.
Just a pet dog. And it turned out that when I adopted Winter, he is a blue-eyed Siberian Husky that is just majestic. He's so gorgeous. And he actually was actively really dying from heartworms, intestinal worms, pretty much everything that you could think of. That dog had it. He was only 30-something pounds, and his weight that he should be is 70.
Wow.
So he was literally half the weight that he was supposed to be.
Wow.
And I took a big risk to bring him home, but I just felt like I had such a connection. They assumed that he was a calm dog because he was dying, but he was healed. We went through all the treatments and everything, from spoon feeding him wet dog food. He had more medications than twice as many medications as my special needs son, which is saying a lot. And he got better, but his demeanor always stayed calm and peaceful. And people started to notice, and they were like, this dog should be a part of Love on a Leash, which is a certified therapy pet program. And so he first started out, and I had him tested to see if he would be a great service dog. Turned out he knew all of the commands. So for my special needs son with profound low verbal autism, he provides pressure therapy, and he actually walks with him so that my 5-year-old, they're both 5 and 6 now, will stay with us and not elope. So these very seemingly small things have provided immense calm to our family, and we're actually able to go camping, in multiple states and stuff because we have our dog Winter. But on the nonprofit side, he actually comes with us and visits all of our widows and widowers that are located locally. And if we have a booth, he comes in and loves on people, and that is his superpower. A lot of testing and therapy and training goes into it to make sure that he's able to do that. But he visits hospices like Welcome Home and the adults at Signal Centers, which is a special needs care center, and also mental health hospitals like Park Ridge Valley as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's terrific. Speaking as someone who has 2 dogs, dogs are great. And my dogs could never have the patience or calmness to become certified as a therapy dog. So that's terrific that you've been able to do that.
And it was just pure luck that he's so wonderful, and his tolerance and calmness is just amazing. And now he has all the energy in the world, and he runs after or beside us. There's a specific safe way to do that beside my bike, and my little boys ride their bikes, and he runs with us, and he goes in our kayak. So I have a kayak and I get in, and the kids get in theirs. And we kayak together. So not only is he the most fun dog ever, that's a great therapy dog, and has given us immense emotional support, but he's also very active.
Cool. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you for telling us about that, and encourage people who have any interest in that to maybe check it out for themselves. It sounds like it's a world I don't know much about, so it's interesting to hear about your experience with this. So thank you for sharing that with us. And if you're in Chattanooga, go and look for Winter and Azurae at a booth somewhere or at a widow get together. That sounds great. Gosh,
little Boy Scout parade actually for the 4th of July. So up on Signal Mountain, he went with us, and so he was quite the little showstopper.
I bet.
He goes everywhere with us. So we just love him.
All the little Scouts Pro, we wanted to come over and pet him, and that's awesome. Cool. Okay, we could keep talking about this all day because I think we've got so many, I don't know, stories and experiences and reflections and anecdotes we could share about. I do think we need to wrap this up soon here. And I guess I'll just say again, I'm thrilled that people are going to be able to read more about your story in Widowed Parents Unite. And again, and I should say, so you've written the foreword to it, and also the book is structured as 52 tips to get through the first year from one widowed parent to another. So we've got 48 different contributors who've written these 52 tips, and you've written one of them yourself, in addition to the foreword. So we have 52 different things from all these different people. The idea being that someone could pick up the book and read 1 or 2 and put it back down and come back later and read another one. And you can kind of jump in and out of it or flip around or whatever seems the most useful to you. Because I know that it's interesting. I hear in grief, I seem to hear people fall into one of 2 camps. Either they're like, give me every book. I want to read every book on grief that exists, and I want more. And the other end of the spectrum is, I can't read. Like, that's the grief brain thing. Maybe it's pure exhaustion. Maybe it's whatever. Even people who said, I used to love reading, are now like, oh my gosh, I can't sit down and read more than a paragraph without whatever happening. And so this book, I think, is designed to be helpful to people who fall into that camp, who maybe want some quick, stuff they can read a little bit here and there and not have to dive into a whole, full length book of hundreds of pages. So I'm very glad that you've shared your experience with us for that, along with all of the other 47 other people who've shared their wisdom with us. So as we wrap up here, I always like to ask my guests at the end one question to leave us with some parting thoughts. If you could say one thing to newly widowed parents, what would you say?
I would say that just because a child is super young, like my oldest was 10 months and my second was in the womb, that doesn't actually mean that they're not going to grieve. In fact, as they reach each developmental milestone, they will grieve in a different way. So I would encourage you to get with family members and friends and keep the memory of your late spouse alive by talking with them about the wonderful memories that you have with them, and share that with them in a very positive, matter-of-fact, but age-appropriate way, so that they can be filled with the confidence of the love that their parent had for them.
Terrific. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I actually think that's a really important point. And I often hear people assuming, oh, your kid is so young, it'll be fine. They won't remember, or they won't know what they lost, or somehow it will be even almost inconsequential. I think some people tend to maybe assume or want to assume. So thank you for sharing that important point with us, that even the very youngest grievers do have a grief process. And it's important to pay attention to that. I'm rambling now.
And now that they're 5 and 6, I would say that they are happy and full of joy. And so the sad moments are outweighed by those wonderful, happy moments and those milestones that you don't have your spouse there to see. Like my late husband, his memorial service was where my oldest son at 10 months took his first steps, and he was so happy.
Yeah.
So, that's just another thing to consider too, that yes, it's so hard to get through those milestones and preschool graduations and of course real graduations, but it is doable, and we are a happy family. We have a beautiful life, and even in all the difficulties, it's still a beautiful life and a wonderful adventure.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Azurae Johnson Redmond, founder of Young Black and Widowed, Inc. So Azurae, where can listeners find you if they'd like to learn more about your work?
If you'd like to learn more about my work, please visit our website, which is www.youngbblackwidowed.org. We can also be found as Young Black Widowed, Inc. on Facebook, and of course, Young Black Widowed on Instagram, Threads, the new Threads, TikTok, etc. You name it, we're out there. And we also have a podcast called Young Black and Widowed that's on Spotify and everywhere that podcasts can be found. And actually, also in addition to my work with my own nonprofit, I actually also lead the National Black Widows community of the Modern Widows Club, which is a well-known nonprofit that I have known about for a while and have looked up to as well.
Terrific. Well, we will put links to all of those things in the show notes, so I'll send listeners over there to make sure they can find all the ways to connect with you and all those terrific resources, and encourage people to reach out. And Azurae, this has been so great. Thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Azurae Johnson Redmond as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com, like for episode 144. And if you're finding the Widowed Parent Podcast helpful, please consider supporting the show. It's easy. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. That's buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. As always, thank you for listening. And until next week, remember, you've got this.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.